Welcome to Draconian, your podcast for news and updates in Hong Kong and Taiwan. I'm your host, William.
Hi everyone, welcome to the episode 41 of the Draconian podcast. This is your host, William. This week's episode will be about how instability have shaped this week's events in Hong Kong and Taiwan, with both the government, legislators, political leaders, and even events that ignite instability. We are seeing both Hong Kong and Taiwan are getting heated as much as possible, and technically overly heated. I was sorry that this episode was postponed for a day due to moisture events that happened recently in the city in Hong Kong. As a result, the recording environment was partially damaged, which led to this episode being recorded in another environment, in a backup plan. Sorry, and thanks for all your patience. If you would like to learn more about what is happening in these two regions, please subscribe to our podcast, whether you're listening from a favorite podcast app or directly from YouTube Music. Thanks for your continued support. And now, let's dive directly into events that happened in Hong Kong first. The first event is about Article 23. The UK's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, or what we call the Foreign Office, had issued a statement about Article 23 in Hong Kong. In the statement, it had directly accused the Hong Kong government of misusing the idea of national security, while at the same time projecting or voicing out their concern on various topics or on how they are considering or how they are misusing legislations or laws that are in UK where the public was directly involved. As a result, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs rebutted strongly about how UK was, quote, having double standards in national security when they consider themselves versus considering the national security situation in Hong Kong. Furthermore, the European Union also voiced out concerns with similar concerns while also concerning the limit of freedom of speech. While at the same time, in Canada, it had also raised similar concerns with the UK, where it stated that the Hong Kong's government's consultation paper had wrongly cited acts of national security or laws of national security that were in place in Canada, where they have stated that citing those laws wasn't a problem, or the meaning of is that citing the law itself wasn't a problem, but citing it without enough context or intentionally omitting context is a very problematic thing. So as a result, basically, the Hong Kong government they tried to brush off all these accusations by stating that a lot of the local chambers of commerce, and they have also invited a lot of consuls in Hong Kong, and most of them support. Well, who is this most of them? We don't know. While at the same time, we're also seeing possible issues or possible ongoing issues with the national security law. After the consultation period ended, the government issued a very quick statement stating that a very large majority, in which is like 98.64% of the people or of those who have submitted these replies were in staunch support of the national security law or the national security law amendments. Next is about the budget. This was discussed last week, where there would be a budget, while in this week it's more about the content of the budget. First, we are seeing record budget deficit or continuous record budget deficit, as seen after 2020. The government first time directly decided that bonds should be considered as a form of income instead of a form of liability or deferred liability. As a result, the discussion in the local industry or local economy were not only about how the government's cost of serving bonds, which some of them have found that it may lead to approximately 7%, or in 7 years' time, the amounts that they serve or the bonds that they serve would only be able to cover the interest cost of the bond itself. As a result, not outgoing, but the finance minister, Paul Chan, basically brushed off all these accusations or all these concerns by stating that for all of these things, there is only one reason, that they are servicing bonds or they are using bonds to fund projects for the future. At the same time, in the budget, it also announced the removal of all control measures on the housing market. These measures were first implemented nearly 15 years ago to combat the curbing rise in the property prices, as seen by 2009 to 2021. Property prices rose for basically it had doubled, while from 1999 or 2003 to 2009 it had nearly quintupled, or basically jumped by over 5 times. As a result, from all of these discussions, it has seemed that basically they try to inject power, or they try to inject a lot of motivation to really spend within the city, but at the same time, I don't know why, but directly promoting spending money in the Greater Bay Area. At the same time, there are also discussions, or in this budget, also announced some reductions in tax cuts or on tax rebates in basically most policies that the government used to attract support or to garner support, such as basically distributing cash or even distributing additional welfare for those, for example, who are having the CSSA, which is a social security aid, or like disabled allowances, etc. From this, basically, it paints a very grim picture on the financial stability or the sustainability of Hong Kong in the near future, while at the same time, for this budget, it also did not address any concerns or did not address anything about the future of Hong Kong. It only addressed it, and furthermore, it also stated that for all these projects, for example, some man-made islands in the south of Tsing in Hong Kong, basically a whole new artificial island, or the Northern Metropolis plan would continue in plan instead of halting or suspending or just postponing for a year or two to see if the local economic situation would be able to so-called would warrant a demand or warrant a rationale for building a whole new metropolis in the north of Hong Kong. The picture is grim, and it is basically very unstable within the city right now. This stability ranges from political instability, or in this case is not instability, but it's like we don't know where it will be, to an outright economic instability. Although we are seeing a bit of recovery of the housing market, but it seems that this small recovery only stemmed not from the market itself or not from some very sustainable economic policies, but it seems to only be a one-off boost. So these are events that happen in Hong Kong, or topics that happen in Hong Kong, where we are seeing instability was ignited across social and political spectrums within the city. And next is about Taiwan, and how political instability in Taiwan are also making or are also having a heavy toll on the stability of the island. So now let's get back into Taiwan. So there are basically two main news that basically occupied headlines in Taiwan, which both are related to the Taiwan Strait itself. So the first news is about the standing committees in the Legislative Yuan. A bit background, these standing committees are basically the powerhouse of the Legislative Yuan, where most of the bills and laws are discussed before being sent to the discussion in the all members committee or directly into discussions. As a result, the people who control these standing committees, or the people who call for these standing committees to be to adjourn or to host these standing committees, have great power. And interestingly, with great power comes great irresponsibility. Yes, we are seeing that for the opposition, for the Taiwan People's Party, they basically voted for all those candidates. For the Chinese Kuomintang, or the Chinese Kuomintang basically gave or nominated people who are basically in very direct confrontation, or in some confrontation with the current ruling government, while having some links with China or foreign adversaries. So the first is about the Internal Administration Committee. For this, the committee itself was not hosted. The committee itself was hosted by one member from the ruling Democratic Progressive Party and another member called Gao Xiumei, or Sumei, yes, a half-blooded original in Taiwan. So in the Internal Administration Committee, originally it was designed to discuss internal matters. However, the boat incident in Kinmen actually was a hot topic, so Cao Qin herself basically used this as a method to call for a discussion for this boat incident. However, this discussion seems not to clarify what happened in the event, but more to instill blame on Quan, a former legislator affiliated to the DPP, while at the same time now is basically head of the Ocean Administration. There are also some wordings which Quan basically stated that this should not be the case. For example, it said that this is not a boat chase incident. Instead, this is a deliberate incident for the Taiwan's Coast Guard to chase and to overthrow ships that happen to be in Taiwan's waters. Interestingly, for all of these discussions, it seems that basically it got into nowhere. And in fact, there also seems to be these instability happening, attacks from various committees, attacks from committee members, and etc. Seems basically to state that, we are taking the Democratic Progressive Party's government into technically, we want to make them responsible for everything that happened in Taiwan. In fact, apart from this Internal Administration Committee, the Foreign and National Defense Committee had some problems itself, where one of the chairs was Ma Wenjun. Basically, we discussed it in a lot of episodes already about her alleged leak of official secrets to South Korea. However, she is now basically the calling member. She got into the committee first. This was very ridiculous by itself, and she even got a place to decide on the topics for what the committee would need to discuss. So we are basically seeing for all those people who are churning churning for the lack of defense, or churning for closer relationships with Taiwan's only adversary, or to remove Taiwan's safeguards, or remove Taiwan's ability to self-defend, instead of bringing or strengthening Taiwan's self-defense power. Furthermore, these seems to be some depressing things, which we consider them like instilling instability. There are, in fact, actually some positive notes even in the opposition, as we are actually seeing opposition legislators for the Education and Culture Committee actually discuss real education matters. One of the opposition legislators, who is called Junko, what they call themselves is in English, used Taiwan's own government, like government issued those spring celebratory items, to request the Ministry of Education to improve their own system when they want to upload their other learning experiences. In fact, in Taiwan, there is a limit of 10 megabytes of these other learning experiences, which a lot of the people consider this to be too low. As a result, the opposition legislator actually asked the Ministry of Education on the rationale behind this low capacity limit, instead of allowing students to upload larger files. These seems to be a better discussions, and we are also seeing some discussions about fertility for the opposition to hope to advance for these better social or to advance social issues. However, for the opposition itself, they seem to try to continue instill some form of instability, as we are seeing they are trying to criminalize dishonesty. When people were called, or when government officials were called to be questioned by these legislators. In fact, a lot of discussions, even during the past 8 years, had only showed one clear sign that this should not be the case, and basically nothing, or in this case, in Taiwan's case, these laws should not be even passed, as this may actually grant too much power to the legislative yuan, while at the same time effectively placing the government under direct control of the legislative yuan, instead of the current power where the government holds the same power and responsibility as the legislative yuan. Which basically, we are discussing the legislatures themselves are advocating for laws that directly have contradiction to Taiwan, or in this case, Republic of China's own constitution. So we are seeing all these interesting things, we are seeing all these problems. And this is not even to the main topic of Taiwan, which is the Kinmen incident. So this incident actually happened for over a week ago, as we have discussed this in last week's news actually, or last week's episode. However, in this episode, we are actually discussing the response of Taiwan's politicians, the Taiwan's own government, and China itself. China itself actually wanted to assert its right on the territorial waters in Kinmen, so they're now actually actively trying to portray this as an incident that was a direct result of misuse of power by Taiwan's own Coast Guard, instead of Taiwan's own idea or Taiwan's own image of portraying, or the Taiwan's government own stance of considering this as an incident, as an unfortunate incident that stemmed from exerting judicial power or exerting administrative power on securing Taiwan's own waters. However, China itself, even after 2 people died from this unfortunate incident, now actively filed to take those Coast Guard members who, in this case, seems to have accidentally shot down or accidentally caused a ship to overturn, to take them to sole responsibility. This was basically China's stance right now. And Taiwan, of course, basically stated that this should not be the case and stated that Taiwan basically should be having its own investigation. China is welcome to provide input in Taiwan's own idea, but we should do our own investigation. China should not interfere in Taiwan or Cayman's own affairs. In fact, China stands. This incident actually happened on 2 weeks ago in mid-February. However, it was only after China's Taiwan office, or Taiwan's office in its own government, considered or named this as an incident that was provoked by Taiwan's pro-independence government, that made this not only into headlines, but also into great direct attacks on Taiwan's own government by the. So these are all news that happened, the topics that happened in Hong Kong and Taiwan last week. For this week, we will be continuing looking into Article 23 and foreign interference crimes, rulings on the colonial incitement crimes, especially updated rulings after the Privy Council's ruling last October. For Taiwan, it will be a discussion of controversial policies, especially on amending marriage rules for people who originate from mainland China. Furthermore, we will also be possibly looking into Taoyuan's airport delay that happened from late last week due to the runway works, which is considered a developing story even until now. We hope you find this episode informative. If you do, please subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Furthermore, and at the same time, if you have any feedback, please let us know in the comments or drop us an email at william@draconianpod.com. Thanks again for listening. We will be back next week with more news from Hong Kong and Taiwan. Have a safe, prosperous, and happy week ahead. Goodbye.